So heading into this next segment, I would be remiss to not share that one of my biggest mentors in my media career over the last 20 years is the late, great Stuart Scott. And I think it's also imperative for us to give it up for our men that can be our biggest supporters. I started my career at the ground up as a production assistant at ESPN, working behind the scenes at SportsCenter. And I just have to say, I will never forget how Stuart, who is also a proud father of two girls who he's a big champion of, I was at the very bottom as a production assistant on the hierarchy, and he treated me with the same respect as a top level athlete. And he always took the time for me. And I think time can be our most valuable gift to others. So may we always take the time for people that we look up to as mentors. All right, now let's turn our attention back to the Global Technology Hub for a discussion on how mentorship can define, shape, and progress women's careers. I know you're going to enjoy this panel on the role of mentorship in pipelining more women into leadership positions. I now turn it over to Brooks Raiford, CEO of NC Tech, to get the panel started. Brooks, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us today. A lot of old and new friends here in the room, so it's wonderful. Old should say that. Long time. Seasoned, what are the right words? So yes, I'm Brooks Raiford, president of the North Carolina Technology Association, or NC Tech. We're actually just coming off our largest event of the year, which is the NC Tech Awards Gala, which was last evening with 700 plus people at the Raleigh Convention Center, honoring excellence in tech in North Carolina. MetLife was a very prominent presence there, longtime member of the association, in fact, dating back to the announcement of this site here in Cary. So I've had the pleasure of working with some of the executives here along the way and have really appreciated that. As was mentioned, our topic today, this panel's topic today is around mentorship. And I want to say a few words about that because at other points of the program, there will be discussions around sponsorship and allyship. So we'll try not to overlap terribly. So I want to read sort of a working definition of mentorship just to set some stage here. A mentor is a person who builds a relationship with you, who speaks with you, and can help you grow. An experienced and trusted advisor with whom you have established a regular cadence of meeting to discuss and solicit advice on career, work, and trajectory. A mentor's wealth of experience can help a mentee navigate unfamiliar experiences, circumstances, and challenges. A mentor provides advice and offers counsel. So there's your context for the definition we'll be sort of working off of today. Our association works to foster growth and champion the innovation sector in North Carolina, which is very much in line with the discussion we're having today overall, and certainly with the exceptional leaders that are joining me on the stage today that represent Dress for Success, SAS, Lenovo, and IBM. Certain fields like science, technology, engineering, and math have always been male-dominated, even though we have more women going into these fields as time goes by. There's still a significant shortage of women, especially in leadership roles. Various studies are out there that talk about what percentage of the tech workforce is female. Our association commissions a report every year that asks that question, among others, and ranks the states. And in the 8 years we've been doing the report, in 6 of those years, North Carolina is ranked first among the states. And in 2 of those years, second. We didn't move down in raw percentage, but Maine somehow slightly topped us. And what we hear anecdotally, panels, leaders in tech, women and men, is the inflow of women in tech is actually not the main problem. Women don't stay in tech. They don't just, everyone says, well, maybe they're leaving to have a family. Maybe, surely there's some of that. They're leaving the field. And so that narrowing of the pyramid of available women to be in leadership roles over time gets quite narrow. It's vexing, and there's been a lot of effort around it, and ironically, not much movement in the last 20 years in that percentage. So, mentorship is one of the tools, one of the activities clearly that needs to be more deeply developed and implemented. So we're going to do quick introductions down the line so you know who's here and what their role is, and then I will toss out some questions. So, Pat?
I'm Pat Nathan. I'm representing Dress for Success. In my career, my paid career was all in tech.
Good morning. I'm Tim Humphrey. I'm representing IBM. I wear. All right.
Somebody got a group discount.
I planted a lot of people in the audience to make me look good. But I wear a few hats for IBM. I'm the site lead for Research Triangle Park, which is our second largest global site, and I'm also the state lead for state of North Carolina. And then I'm a leader in our Chief Data Office and a proud NC State alumni and trustee. Go Pack.
You're just cheating now.
I gotta follow that. Oh, good morning. My name is Jennifer Chase, and I'm the Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer here at SAS, just down the street, and really happy to be here. Thank you.
All right, Lenovians, you heard all those applause. So, don't embarrass me. I'm Calvin Crosslin. I am the Vice President of HR, our Chief Diversity Officer, and President of Lenovo Foundation. And shouts out to my Lenovians.
There you go. Lenovians. That sounds like something you would hear on Star Trek or something. Yeah. Secret handshake. All right. Well, I'm going to toss some of these questions to a specific person just to get things started, but clearly would welcome input from anybody on the panel who would like to. So, Pat, we'll start with you. What barriers have you experienced or observed that limit the progression of women in STEM roles?
First, Brooke, I just have to tell those who aren't here and those who can't see that Brooke's got on pink socks. Oh. Isn't that great? Thank you, Brooke. I entered the industry 40 years ago, and things have changed some since then, but I was an only. I was always the only woman. At least at that point, I was white, and everybody was white so at that point, but I was the only woman. And not only was I the only woman, but I didn't have people in my family who had been successful in technology. I just, in math, anything. And I didn't see that around me at all. So that was hard. And I'm also an introvert, just barely, but I am an introvert. So it was tough to be in situations, particularly as I got into leadership roles. A second barrier, and I'm going to be really candid today, I'm retired, so you can't fire me.
Call that FU insurance.
I'll give you an example. I was a director at the time, but I had someone take me outside. It was my leader, outside of a meeting, and said, you know, you're never going to be a vice president in this company if you can't learn to be a bigger ass, fill in the blank. And I don't remember what my response was at the time, but I can tell you now I am so glad I didn't get promoted if that was the criteria for promotion, which it was. We were moving really fast, and you go in, I'm shaking just remembering it. You know, it was combat. Combat, we had a kill competitor name campaign. You know, it was like, man, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And those environments weren't for me. And it wasn't until I got a role which was creating the CSR, the sustainability for a multinational company globally, that I found my role that fit my personality and who I am authentically. So that was a barrier, finding the right organization that valued my disposition.
Interesting. Jen, given the question, I'm going to toss it to you next if you want to comment on that. Any barriers you've observed or experienced?
Well, first thing I'd like to say is because of people like you, Pat, I wasn't an only, right, throughout my career, and I'm so grateful. I think we stand on shoulders of the work that you've done, so thank you. I would say, yeah, but at the same time, I did have a really just terrific set of role models to look up to of women, but it wasn't enough, right? And so I think that's the challenge as we talk about bringing women into STEM. How do we keep them in? How do we help them grow? And I think we've got to see more of those role models. So I really appreciate, Pat, how you've trailblazed.
Any comments from either of you on that? What you've observed?
Yeah, we observe it every day, and part of my role as Chief Diversity Officer is that all the things we talk around mentorship and sponsorship and coaching and all that. you try to set up that infrastructure for people who may not naturally have that because of the network they're part of, right? Because I think it is an essential component of being successful. So yeah, absolutely see it. I think it's the same for women as it is for other underrepresented groups. And so you have to set that same infrastructure while you're trying to change the culture of the company, right, and make it a more level playing field, if you will. You also have to prepare people to overcome the barriers that exist, and we know they exist.
Yeah, I'd add that, especially for all my men in the room, we've got to pay attention. And when I say pay attention, we should look at the structures of our teams, the makeup of our teams. If you are constantly meeting with key people in your teams, key people in your company, and they're all men, you got a problem. And you know, it's up to us to act to fix that, right? Like I always say, one of the things that troubles me is every time there's a problem with diversity, we look to the group that's being affected to try to fix it. And you know, that's just not right. So you know, we're talking about diversity and having the right representation of women, then men, we need to act. Right? We need to act. It's the same thing for underrepresented minorities. You know, I'll challenge the majority to look at your teams, and if you see you don't have enough representation, then you can fix it, right? So those are the barriers that I see, and it's primarily things that I think we can fix. And if we do pay attention, future years of this won't be about fixing the problem. It'll be about how do we sustain all of the great change we've made.
Good point. Jenn, I'm going to come back to you. I believe in the intro to the panel it was mentioned about the importance, in her case, of also her male mentors over time. So the next question speaks to that. What do you think, why do you think it's more important than ever for women in STEM to have mentors and a variety of types of mentors?
Yeah, and I loved hearing from Katie about Stuart, and I think many of us here have a soft spot for Stuart being, you know, a local gentleman. Look, I often think of mentorship, my mentors, and how I want to help my mentees as look at it as a board of directors. The reason why you have a board of directors at an organization is you need different experiences, different perspectives, and it's that really well-rounded point of view that's going to help you. And so I know personally for me, based on maybe what I need advice on at that moment in my career, I'm going to tap into those different experiences. I'm going to tap into my male counterparts who've been tremendous allies for me to say, hey, you've done this really well. Help me, or challenge my thinking on this, right? So I think that is so important that you really develop your own board, and it has to have a diverse set of experiences. And we might talk about this a little bit later, but I also look for how maybe seasoned you are in your career, and then also getting early career mentors and reverse mentorship. I mean, that I know when I think about some of the ideas or perspectives I've gained lately, it's been from some of the reverse mentorship that I actively seek out.
Excellent. Others? Variety. You've all been mentors, are mentors, and have been mentored. So
Yeah.
I'm curious about your own experiences with this.
Yeah, I like the theme of the board of directors, and I also like the theme of not making sure that your group, your board, right, or your mentors don't have to always look like you or think like you, right? And you can't criticize people for not having a diverse network if your network is in fact not diverse, right? So I think you have to reach out to people that perhaps don't look like you and don't think like you to get these various opinions. So I like the board of directors approach.
And I think mentors can be, we sometimes overcomplicate it. We think we have to have this relationship and have meetings, and that you can have mentors in so many ways. I've had asked people in the past to help me during presentations. When we finally got to be two of us, at least one other, I would say to the other, hey, would you kind of spot me as I'm presenting and stuff, and see if you see things that I could do differently. And it's really great to have someone who's just doing simple things like that type of a mentor as well. And I also think your mentors can take you places you'd never go. It's something we do a lot at Dress for Success with women with mock interviews. With all of you guys provide mock interviews for our women, and going places that you've never seen yourself in just changes your whole perspective. Walking into a place like MetLife, even driving up to this campus, can be so empowering. So hang out with people that go cool places and go places that you would like to see or never maybe even dreamt you could go to.
We've had a number of panels and speakers on this topic, as you can imagine, in my association over the last number of years, and something that stuck out to me. One was a woman who's the CIO of a very major brand company that you would all know, who was a poli-sci major and got pushed along the way by male leaders within her organization to go out of her comfort zone and move into tech, which over time was less of a tech job than a management job. Clearly, aptitude had to come along the way for that. And she has said many times on panels like this, it's so important for people, whatever position you're in, whoever you are, to have mentors who don't look like you, have the same experience as you, because there can be blind spots. If all you have is people like you advising you, there may be some really good feedback you're missing because they're missing it.
Right.
Another comment, maybe one of you mentioned this, a man who's the CEO of another major company made the observation that as a minority, he gets asked all the time to be a mentor, to be a guide, to be the chair of the committee related to diversity and so on. He's happy to do it, but he's only got so much bandwidth. And so broadening the field of who you ask to be part of your team is crucial, because the obvious go-tos are overcommitted, overstretched. And they're probably not doing as good a job as they would like to do by trying to be as accommodating as they would like to be. So, very good point. Now my phone just went off. All right. Tim, mentors, unlike sponsors, may or may not be in a position to directly impact a person's career path, but can be a connector. Talk about the role of the mentee in capitalizing on the guidance of the mentor.
Well, I'll start with the point that you made around the board of directors. I like to think about it as your presidential cabinet. So if you're going to be a good mentee, you've got to have people that fill in the blanks for your blind spots. So that's number one. I think number two, hopefully there's no lawyers in the room. No lawyers.
There's bound to be at least one.
I know there's one over there because she's looking at me, giving me the. But as a mentee, you can't lead the witness, right? And what I say that is when you have your time with your mentor, it is special and it is valuable, and you need to get something from it. And I mentor a lot of people because it's a passion of mine. But you can't come into the session with a predetermined outcome or predetermined response that you want to hear, right? The best thing you can do as a mentee is be open and be transparent so that you can get that critical feedback that's going to help you succeed. And there's some people in this room, I planted a lot of people in this room, that have mentored me and given me some very critical feedback that I didn't want to hear. And that's the type of mentor relationship that I like, because that's what's going to help me grow. So there's people in here that have helped me. There's people in this room that hopefully I have given them some critical feedback that made them upset, that eventually they thought about it and it helped them better themselves. So I would challenge everybody in your relationships. I'm sure everybody in here has a mentor. Raise your hand if you don't. God, somebody was going to raise their hand. But be transparent and look for that critical feedback. And if you're not getting it from your mentor, if you have a good board of directors, there's probably somebody else you can go to that will have the experience and perspective that can provide it.
Go ahead, Jen.
I was going to say, I think what you bring up is a point of you need to, as a mentee, be comfortable being a little bit vulnerable. I mean, if ever there was a time to be vulnerable, and it's in those conversations. And so I think in the definition you talked about that trusted advisor. Well, to really be able to take advantage of a trusted advisor, you've got to allow that vulnerability. And so don't be afraid to do that in these conversations. You're going to get the best input if you do.
Calvin, I want to ask you a question because of your HR leadership role in particular. This is not on the approved list, so I'm just going to go off script.
Where's that lawyer?
But what kinds of things does an organization, in your case like Lenovo, you as an HR lead there, the HR lead there, How do you support this sort of stuff structurally? How do you encourage and develop opportunities for people to connect mentees and mentors?
Yeah, I mentioned before, I think there's a number of programs where we try to build that kind of an infrastructure, whether it's trying to identify an executive in the organization that really has decision-making power, influence to be your sponsor, and then finding either your manager or someone else in the organization that's more of a mentor that you can have sounding board, but in a non-threatening, not part of your job, you can go and confess your sins that I'm struggling here without it being performance feedback. And then the HR community, right? As a team, to think about your development and to work on that development. And hopefully, you know, as you put out your aspirational goals, your strengths, and your developmental needs, you have this team to help you there. Now, while we do that formally, I'm also a huge fan, I had this conversation just last night at the event, of organic relationships that develop. And I think back to Tim's point about your board of directors, if you're one of my mentees and I think highly of you, and there's a point at which I can't help you in an area, let's say you're in the software arena, I'm just giving you kind of general advice on mentorship, I might say, hey, I would like you to talk to my friend Tim, right? I think that would be a good connection for you to have. And then it's up to you as the mentee to set that up and kind of not have a predetermined outcome, but kind of have a little bit of an agenda about what you'd like to see out of that relationship, right? So I think that's how you try to facilitate it. You can do it on a formal level, and I think you can help people understand how informally they can just reach out to people and say, hey, you have 15 minutes for a cup of coffee or a conversation. And if that goes well, then perhaps you get to the point where you ask them, would you be my mentor?
Gotcha.
I got something to add to
Please.
that. So Calvin, truth be told, was one of those people that was my mentor before he knew he was my mentor.
No.
When I left Lenovo and came to IBM, all my friends and what felt like my family was back at Lenovo. I'd spent so much time there and putting my heart and soul into the PC company. I came back to IBM and I really didn't know anybody, even though I had worked there before. And I met Calvin on the first day, and I was like, this guy's nice, and he's like helpful. So
My
periodically,
family would never co-sign that, but thank you.
Yeah. I'll write it on your performance review for your boss. And I was like, this guy's helpful. And every time I hit a situation that was difficult where, you know, some aspects of the culture had changed or processes had changed, I'd reach out to Calvin and he'd help me. And, you know, so then I was like, I got to build a relationship. And before long, he was mentoring me. And, you know, I never asked him to be my mentor. It was just somebody that I thought was of value, could be of value to me and could help me. And by reaching out and making myself vulnerable, he was able to give me a lot of advice, and I don't know what I'd be without his help.
Well, thank you.
That's tremendous.
Fast forward, when I finally got promoted to vice president, first person I called was Tim for his advice, and I did ask him, because, hey, I need you. So it can kind of go circular. Right?
That's great.
Well, I'll just build on that. And as we were preparing for this panel today, I mentioned that one of the first mentees I had was a young woman of color engineer, and her name was Yolanda Lee Conyers.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
predecessor.
She's awesome.
That's my predecessor.
Yeah, well, folks in New York won't know, but
Yeah, so Yolanda Lee Conyers is my predecessor in the role that I'm in today, and one of my strongest mentors. Not to confuse a lot of terminology, but it's mentor, sponsor, and coaches. She does it all. So.
One of my mentors, too.
Back to the right.
Yep.
You pass people along to folks in your network that when you think highly of them. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, most of you have been mentored, as you've just alluded to, and have been mentors. So, Calvin, what's an example of how mentorship has impacted your journey? You've hit a couple of examples here,
Yep.
and or how you've impacted someone else.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we already segue right into it. I mean, if it were not for Yolanda, I think I got the courage in 2015 to ask her, would she be my mentor? And she said yes, and I ran home and showed my fiance the book she wrote, and my fiance looked up on LinkedIn and said, she's not your mentor. She is. And over time, you know, we would meet with my development plan and talk about my career goals and some of my strengths and areas of opportunity and roles that I should take, you know, to get to where I wanted to be. And what happened in that relationship as a mentee was I started to get more and more curious about Yolanda's real role and what her real goals were for herself, for her team, and for the overall Lenovo organization. And I had an opportunity as an HR partner for a particular division to drive those for her. It was our executive representation goals, which one of them is women globally in leadership or executive roles. And so understanding better what she was trying to accomplish, the relationship evolved from mentor to mentee to me being an advocate for the work that she was doing. And then fast forward, I had asked her, could I go work for her at some point to learn, because I wanted to be in her role, and she told me, no, I need you in the division you're supporting because it's one of the most important divisions in our business. So luckily, the normally animated confrontational Cal didn't come out, and I decided to just say, not no, but not now. And fast forward, when she decided to retire, she had convinced my boss and the senior leadership team that I would be her successor. And it was fairly surreal. We have a process called OHRP, which we talk about succession planning, organizational health. When I got the deck to do it for my team the following year, to see my name in not only that box, in various boxes where she was advocating for me for other roles where she thought I had more capability and scope was a pretty powerful moment. And similarly, I have another sponsor or mentor that was one of my line clients, and it's back to Tim's point why I tell this story. We had gone on a trip to Singapore, and it was a week-long trip. We were in China, different places. And I thought the week went really well. She said, well, let's have a drink before we go back and debrief. I said, okay, fine. So I'm sitting in a chair, we're having a cocktail. I'm waiting for her to tell her what a wonderful HR partner I am. I've been supporting her for like a month. Like, you're the greatest thing that ever happened, right? And she sits me down and she goes, you are really green. And again, the normally animated, want to debate Cal started to flare up. And I said, no, wait a minute. Why don't you just hear her out and listen? Which I did. And that was in 2006. And fast forward to 2017, I recruited her to come to IBM. She was the chief supply chain officer, now chief operating officer. And again, one of my strongest mentors and supporters. And it was because over time we developed that trust. And she can be very, very brutally honest. Tim, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Tough love, I'll call it.
Hope she's not watching.
That's why I'm not using her name, even though she knows who she is. But it was the best thing for me. That candid feedback of places where I could develop was the best thing for me. So the second part of your question is, being an HR generalist or partner for 30 some odd years, you're in a unique position to be around a table to have a voice. And if you don't use a voice, you don't need to be at that table. And so where I see people operating in various parts of the organization, and I have a better way to calibrate than some people that they work within that person's organization, so you're naturally going to defend or support them. I have more of a neutral voice. So no matter who it is, I have an opportunity to chime in for them, but in particularly women or people of color who don't often get mentioned in some of these rooms. So I have an opportunity to be more of an ally. And then of course, like Tim, I would never have done as well in my career or even as a father if I didn't have mentors, right? Because being a father, you don't have a manual. So I looked at people who I thought were great fathers and said, hey, you run this challenge, how do you navigate these things? And so because of that, like Tim, I'm very passionate about, giving back or passing it forward. And I'm very, very proud of most of my mentees because not only do I learn from them, not only do they learn from me, I hope they do, but I learn a tremendous amount from them and actually call on them sometimes when I have important projects to get their perspective because oftentimes it's different than mine.
So Brooke, I'd like to bring up an example of, for those of you who are already in leadership positions and are mentoring or considering it, is especially as you go on in your career, I keep getting messages from people that I haven't seen in a long, long time and about how much that impacted them. And it is so fulfilling.
It is.
I had one this summer that someone I hadn't heard from in 10, 15 years, our paths hadn't crossed, and she reached out to me and just wanted to get together. I said, I'm in Geneva at this conference thinking about you and the impact you had. And I'm like, wow, I don't remember having a big impact. And I happened to be in the country she was going to be in next, and we got together, and she shared with me how impactful she was in a role. We were both in a tech, but she was in a non-technical job, if you will. And an opening came up for something in sustainability, and I thought that she'd be great in it. And she said, I have no background in chemistry or any of that. I'm like, you don't have to have that. You do need to be able to pronounce the chemicals, but you can look that up. I can say that. But you've got everything. Your transferable skills. You'll do really well in this. And unbeknownst to me, I had not followed her career. She had gone on, she had leveraged that. I knew she took the job of the company we were with, but she'd gone on to others. She's on international boards now, and she's just an expert in this. field. And I went out to dinner with her recently in another country, and her husband, and he shared how much that had changed their whole financial future. And I had no idea. I mean, she was just great at it, and I moved on. So it's really, really fulfilling over time. And just some small little things like that are really going to change some people's lives. So give them the time.
That is awesome.
I would say there's someone here in the audience who I've known a long time, Dr. Sandra Wall-Williams, who has written about something that Pat just reminds me of. Women, in particular your focus, don't wait until you're ready, necessarily. Don't not apply because you can't check every box on that job description. Women, very broad generalization here, tend to do that far more than males. One of our women panelists at an event we ran put it bluntly, men ask for opportunities, women are grateful for getting the ones they're given, and that's got to change.
Yeah, very good.
So I'm going to open this one up to whoever would like to take it. For audience members who are watching us today who may not have had a structured mentor or that kind of a relationship, what are some actionable strategies for finding one? Getting over that nervousness or even knowing how to navigate that?
I'll start. I've had a lot of people come to me and ask me that question, and one of the things I tell people is everybody's favorite subject is themselves. Right? So if there's somebody you're thinking about might be a good mentor, instead of walking right up and say, hey, be a mentor for me, go up to them and ask them about their career and how they got to where they're at and some of the experiences they've had. I don't know anybody that's ever not willing to talk about themselves, right? And it's a very easy tool to use. And then that lets you just start a conversation and a dialogue, right? Most of the mentors I have, I didn't ever ask them, hey, be my mentor. It was, we had a working relationship, or I admired them from afar, and that grew into a mentor-mentee relationship. So I think that's the easiest thing you can do. Of course, you can always take somebody in your network and say, hey, can you connect me with somebody? That works too, but just the easy one is remember everybody's favorite subject is themselves and build on that.
But you, Jen?
I think what you said there too is it can be just a small conversation. It doesn't need to be something formal. And I think if you, it's sometimes those small moments of mentorship that can be just as impactful as those big structured relationships that you have. So I'd say, most of the times a mentee is going, or a mentor is going to want to help, right? Yeah. So don't be afraid to ask, because I think you're going to be really surprised at the people that are there wanting to support you.
Yeah, I would agree with both comments. I think, when you first engage with someone, having a background and interest in knowing who they are and really wanting to hear what they've done. I mean, maybe it's something that you aspire to do. But I think you're right. If you have a natural conversation, there's a natural chemistry. I think that the next thing behind people liking to talk about themselves is helping others, right? Yep. And I think most people who are in positions of influence recognize that someone helped them get there and that they have an obligation and oftentimes a passion to pay that forward. So I think these things can really evolve naturally.
Well, the topic of this panel is really, or the focus of this panel is on how mentorship can help progress women's careers into leadership. So I'm going to end with that question, basically. Once someone has one or more mentors, how can a mentee leverage those relationships to move into roles of increasing leadership? Not all at once.
Well, I'll take a shot at it. So I think, one of them is what we talked about is being open and vulnerable to feedback, right? And particularly if your mentor, and hopefully you've chosen one or they've chosen you that you really trust and that they can give you very, very candid feedback. So the first thing is to use that feedback to develop yourself, right? So that you're competitive and you're ready. Not that you have to check all the boxes, right? But that you're prepared. And then I think the next thing is leveraging that relationship with those mentors for other people in their network that are people of influence that can also help you, right? They can make those introductions, that can mention, hey, I know this person, they're outstanding at whatever it is, right? And they become more of a sponsor, right? We can talk about the definitions of all this stuff later. But I think there's also just a natural way, just like you have your own network and you're always helping your mentees or people within your network, you also not only just want something out of a relationship, I think over time, you get known for being someone that's good at these things. And because of your reputation and because you're good at these things, it's easier for folks in your network that are mentors to then say, hey, I think you should spend some time with that person. And hopefully at some point you land in a place where opportunity and your skills and background experiences align.
Anyone else want to take a stab?
You know, I'd say the nature of the conversation as you go from maybe an individual contributor up to a leader with your mentor should begin to shift a little. One of the things I notice about myself, and then as I work with people at different points in their career, is as you get into a leadership role, the conversation should be more around, all right, I'm thinking through this. What are the different, challenge my thinking here, as opposed to, I think when you're earlier in your career, you're looking for guidance, maybe something more specific, like what would you do in this scenario? Instead, it has to switch to, what are the different paths? What are the different considerations? And so I think you've just got to be prepared to have a different type of conversation with your mentor, so that you can really explore more areas.
Might it be time to shift or add mentors too, and not just
Expand.
Yeah.
So Brooke, I'm going to answer the question like a politician. I'm going to get a message across that I want to say rather than answering your question.
Preach.
I thought you were going to say it depends.
Maybe not.
I just wanted to comment on the importance of affinity groups and the impact they've had on me and I think on our communities. And the example I'll give was I got involved in WITI, Women in Technology International, when I was in Austin. And I moved overseas, and again, I was an only. And so I started a WITI chapter in London and then also one in Dublin. And we did a suit drive out of our Bracknell office outside of London for Dress for Success London. And that was right as Dress for Success had just been founded in New York and was had been on Oprah, and so it had gone viral. And they brought up a picture of a woman in a poster. She has a suit on just from here to here, and it said, to some women, this is a life jacket. When you give your resources to a woman, you're giving her a second chance. And doing that suit drive, and it was suggested by someone in the WITI chapter I was in. I didn't know about Dress for Success London, but that is what inspired me when I did retire to start Dress for Success. I was speaking at a local WITI chapter, and a woman named Joan Nelson came up to me afterwards and said, "Oh, I love what you're doing. I want to be involved in that." And those here in the Triangle know who Joan Nelson is. So women's affinity groups, there are just so many people you can meet that way. They're so supportive, they're so interconnected, and it's such an easy way to go find people who will support you and inspire you and take you to new places. So that wasn't your question, but
It's a great answer.
my answer.
Got my vote.
Well, thank you very much to all of you for the time you put into preparing for today and for spending time here today. Thank you to MetLife for, I guess, year 4 in offering this program with quite a large audience, as I understand it, all the way around. And thank you very much for the opportunity to moderate today. Appreciate it.
So Brooke, is our time up, or can I say something else?
We got 2.4 minutes.
Hey, I can do it. Again, when we were prepping for this, one of the things we went over was some statistics. And I saw one this morning about 83% of the companies that were interviewed think that this is a really important topic and want to do something about it. We went over the numbers, and I transitioned 15 years ago out of tech into the nonprofit sector, and I was just appalled that the numbers haven't changed in the 15 years I've been gone. I went off and started the nonprofit here, and we've served collectively, with many of you helping, over 20,000 women. And what you guys been doing this 15 years? Now, seriously, I want to know what you're going to do differently the next 15 years. We got to change the behaviors and the processes, or this isn't going to change. We'll just be here talking about it again. So that's my challenge to us all. What are we going to do differently?